Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. Thanks for joining our virtual Lunch and Learn. We are Joel Blake and Jim Whitney with Marketing Technologies. Today, we're going to give you some insights from around the manufacturing industry on the misconceptions and realities behind Made in USA. If you watch the news, which I don't recommend, it's all either globalization or bring all manufacturing back to America. Well, it's not that simple, and we're going to tell you why. If you haven't worked with Marketing Technologies before, we are a manufacturer's rep firm covering the Western United States. We're a team of responsive manufacturing experts. For over 40 years, we've delivered plastics, metals, and electronics custom manufacturing to solve your production and prototyping needs. And now I'm going to hand it over to my partner, Jim, to introduce himself, tell you a little bit more about today's content.
Thanks, Joel. Great to have everybody here to talk through Made in USA. Marketing Technologies has worked with thousands of OEMs, which gives us inside access to how companies are adapting and thriving during our new normal. We'll be sharing our thoughts and firsthand experiences with what some of the most successful OEMs consider when deciding to rethink Made in USA. We'll talk about today's manufacturing landscape, shifting priorities we see OEMs focusing on, and yes, they do tell us. We'll hit some details on the design, decision factors, share 4 case studies, and a little surprising data, then wrapping up with our gift card drawing and an opportunity for you to ask some questions. Throughout the presentation, please send your questions to staff through the chat window, and we'll get to them during our Q&A slide.
Yeah, so what do we need to say about the current manufacturing landscape? It's just business as usual, right? Well, no, it's a little different in 2020 than it's ever been. We're all dealing with the consequences of COVID-19, shut down multiple countries and supply chains for extended periods. But even before that, we started to see tariffs coming into place on overseas tooling, overseas production. Customers still haven't figured out how to navigate that, and how do you handle a 10 to 25% increase on your production costs that you weren't anticipating. And all of these things have come into place, have raised the uncertainty in international manufacturing. We've seen supply chain disruptions, difficulty of procuring component and materials, particularly parts and products that are coming from overseas.
Well, holy paradigm shift, Joel. Was that fast or what? And it was fast. Honest, it really was. In 2019 and several decades before, it was all about the 3 basics: price, quality, and speed. Those are the 3 things that we always talked about. As salespeople, we'd talk to customers and, they'd have a new project to quote, and we'd talk about what they needed in those areas. Obviously, quality was never a negotiable item, but price and speed, that's what it was all about. Not so much anymore.
Yeah, that's right. It used to be nice and quaint and simple, right? Make it good, fast, and cheap for me. Well, 2020 has changed a lot of presumptions that people had about their manufacturing supply chains. People are starting to think more in terms of value instead of cost. So what am I getting for my money rather than how much does it cost me? OEMs are looking for more control of their supply chain. So that might be proximity of supply base. It might be the level of oversight that you're providing to your suppliers. And then most importantly, supply continuity. You can't afford to be lying down and losing money in the market. And we'll talk more about that on the next slide. So these are some of the things that we're hearing from real customers every day that are sourcing parts and products overseas. I'm lying down and I can't get parts or retrieve my tools. So my production is offline. I can't get parts because they're either on a boat or my supplier's shut down. Maybe their whole region is shut down, and I have no way of retrieving my tools. Communication has always been a challenge overseas, and it's not just a language barrier that everybody thinks about, but it's the inconvenience of late night conference calls, the time zone difference, and not being able to synchronize with the people that are seeing and making your parts every day. Overseas suppliers have historically struggled with change as well. They want to typically ramp up production and just keep running as long as possible. Try to do an engineering change to the tooling or even just a minor material change on the BOM can really be a challenge with an overseas supplier if you don't have that intimate relationship and you're not in sync with your manufacturing base.
Yeah, so good points, Joel, certainly. And, you'll see a couple of the other quotations on here. My first run of parts was great, then quality fell off a cliff. One of our exasperated customers just 3 months ago was completely shut down due to quality issues. While their normal go-to is putting 3 or 4 people on a plane, sending them to the supplier, sitting in the manufacturing plant, working, in the conference rooms, we've all done it. They were forbidden to do this by government regulation. Nobody could fly anywhere. It just is one of the small problems that we see. It feels like a small problem, but when you can't get product and you can't get parts and you can't send people to go get things moving, it becomes a very big problem. Another example, and probably the most troubling thing I've heard over the years, is a large sporting goods company went to China for a new product. It was a new design for a hiking pack. Design engineer and the product manager traveled to China to do first article approvals, some troubleshooting. And while they're there, they want to go do some souvenir shopping. They don't travel often. They wanted to bring something home. Walking through the markets, what do they find? They find the product that their company has spent getting patents on, spent a lot of money on IP, being sold in the market, rejects essentially that came out of the plant where they were at, no labels, no branding, but the same exact product. So as CNBC tells us, there is evidence of IP theft for over 1/3 of the OEMs that go and do business in China. It's a painful thing for a company that makes that kind of investment and then can't, engage to get any kind of protection for that intellectual property. So hidden costs, yes. IP theft is certainly a giant one, but it's not the only one. Like an iceberg, there's so much you don't see on the surface, but it's there anyway. Tooling, service, shipping delays, inventory on the ocean, or tied up in customs. All the travel and is what was specified, what you ended up getting. All items to consider besides just part pricing when sourcing a product.
Yeah, that's right, Jim. So the reality is all those things are costing you money, whether you're capturing those costs or quantifying those costs. So what do we recommend for customers? Well, you have to use a total cost model view of launching your product. And what does that mean? You might hear it called total value, total cost of ownership, but it's basically going beyond the BOM cost, the spreadsheet costs that you're getting for components, and looking at what are the intrinsic costs to manufacturing in a certain region or a certain supplier. So, we talked about inventory a little bit. So inventory flexibility is critical for our customers. Not only having the necessary inventory when they need it, but not having to stock bulk orders in their warehouse, being able to order on a more flexible stock and ship basis. Historically, we've seen U.S. suppliers be able to accommodate those needs better. Jim talked about the IP. I wish we could say that hiking pack story was a rare exception, but 1 in 3 North American companies are having their IP stolen by Chinese suppliers. That is a staggering statistic out of CNBC. Some other things to consider: oversight of your suppliers. They're the expert in their process, but you're the expert in your product. So you've got to help them bring your product online and optimize the process to meet your demand and meet your market needs. How do you do that when you can't hop on a plane and travel, or even in normal times when you can travel? You're spending tens of thousands of dollars to send a team over there for a week, not to mention the time spent. It's much more challenging than being able to drive or hop on a quick flight to a U.S. supplier and provide that oversight to get started. So few other factors listed in the total cost model. Jim, you want to talk more about, in addition to the cost model and the total value, we've got some other decision factors here that are really important.
Well, absolutely. And, some of these things are just intuitive when we experience them, and as customers, you experience them, things like tooling and molds. So they're less expensive, so they contribute less to the total cost. But that's just one piece of the puzzle. If you want to start making changes, you have quality issues with parts, and suppliers won't, allow you to come see the tooling, or you're not sure what the material is made of, et cetera. Tooling's always been a real issue for companies who buy overseas and want to do anything beyond just placing an order for that first tool. Supply chain control and inventory management, I mentioned that earlier. Those are both things that are critical. IP protection. But probably the biggest item on this slide that I want to just mention is design for manufacturability. We'll see in one of the case studies that, there is money to be saved up front before a tool is ever cut, a part is ever made. It's all in the design process. And while certain products, veer more to a higher end than the other, there are times when, studies have been done. I remember a study from Hewlett-Packard that they found that 90% of the overall cost reductions on a project could be had at the design for manufacturability stage before it ever got launched. So it's just, I can't stress DFM enough to have a supplier who will be making the components that you need to be involved to help manufacture the best, highest quality, lowest cost product time after time. Now, Joel's going to start us off with a great example. It's one of our 4 case studies, and we'll have him go through this for you.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out a quick reminder since we've had several new attendees join. We're taking questions. If you have questions on Made in USA, how you should be approaching it in this new world, chat that to the webinar chat, and we'll take some questions at the end. So we want to give you guys not only conceptual knowledge of what goes into Made in USA and how you approach it, but we want to give some real-world examples of OEMs that we've worked with and how they decided on where to manufacture and what their requirements were. The first one here is a robotics company. We have made these a little bit generic to protect the privacy of our customers. So the products that you're going to see here are representative, but they're not the actual products we're manufacturing. But in this case, we're talking about a robotic cart, a self-driving cart that's being used in manufacturing environments. It's cutting-edge technology. It can drive among chaos, as they say, drive through the manufacturing plant with humans, dogs, whatever it might be at your facility walking all around it. And it's a large, complex electromechanical product. So the customer needed a contract manufacturer that could do both the electronics and the mechanical pack out and deliver the product complete. They needed a supplier that could scale with them because it was a startup customer at the time. We got involved pretty early at the DFM stage. The customer had assembled a few prototypes in-house, but they were ready to start thinking production. They had their sales team out there trying to sell units, and they didn't know if they were going to get an order next week for 10 units or 1,000 units. So they needed a contract manufacturer that could handle either of those scenarios. And then their IP protection was super critical. This is a cutting-edge technology space, robotics. You're seeing it applied to all different industries, and being first to market in these spaces is so important that they couldn't afford the risk of losing their IP to a supplier or a supply chain that they didn't have control over. So where they landed was with our contract manufacturer, Keytronic. We've represented Keytronic over 20 years. They're multi-location, multinational contract manufacturer, but the bulk of their operations are in North America. This product ended up being built at Keytronic's Mississippi facility for a couple of reasons. They were able to do PCBA in-house as well as the full electromechanical build, and it is a complex product. They had the space, the footprint to accommodate large builds of the product. So you can imagine 1,000 of these carts, they're a 3x2x3 type size cart, will take up a lot of space, and Keytronic had the ability to handle that. Operating in Mississippi, Keytronic, U.S. manufacturing, but a cost competitive area in the U.S. And every customer is cost sensitive. So we still had to deliver the total value that met their target range and allowed them to sell their product at a realistic price. So that's what the solution that Keytronic was able to provide, and the customer left happy.
It's a great product and a great story, and really, robotics are everywhere, and we're going to see more and more of this. So shifting a little bit, slightly different market. We work in many markets. Example of a piece of industrial mixing equipment that's used in food processing. It's an aluminum sand casting that creates a bowl where different food chemistry is mixed at high speed. And it's a next generation product for a current product that's in production with parts coming from Asia. The requirements presented to us were really compared against the existing product. So it was really trying to fix some quality and manufacturing issues. The first one was the surface finish of the machine surfaces where the vacuum seal occurs. We've got to meet a surface finish of 1.6 micrometers, very, very smooth for a machine surface. There could be no visible surface porosity on the inside or outside of the part. As a ball or a cone that handles chemistry, the inside is really the working part of it, and that's a little bit unique. It was one of the issues that there was trouble communicating that back and forth on the existing, or I should say the first generation product. The reason for the porosity, requirement is, being a food processing item, needs to be cleaned out. If there's porosity and you've got chemistry in there and it's not cleaned out thoroughly, the next batch can get contaminated. The customer went to General Foundry Service, our sandcaster. They've got a number of different processes, and we looked at a couple of them through the DFM process. And again, this is one of the things I can't stress strongly enough. Through multiple conference calls, video calls, sharing screens, going through files, going through design iterations where we would mark up parts, customer would incorporate in their model, et cetera. We were able to save time and money on this product, and just delight the customer. There's no more unexpected machining or other expensive finishing processes, which are on the initial iteration that comes from Asia. So we were able to get those costs out of the product. It gets cast, we machine the sealing surfaces, and we bead blast it. And it is a huge overall cost savings, even before you look at things like freight and managing inventory, et cetera. Just really overcame a lot of the issues that they had on the first iteration of the product. Joel, I think you've got another great example, points up material integrity and product finish.
Yeah, so we looked at a full electromechanical build. We looked at a sandcasting, aluminum sandcasting, and now we're going to talk about a sheet metal fabrication project. So this was a customer in the power distribution space, manufacturing DC power systems and battery chargers, primarily to protect industrial and commercial facilities from power outages. So picture a data center that needs battery backup. This is the type of system that would be installed there. This product was already in production, and the customer was being pressured by their management team to source all components overseas if possible to cost reduce. However, they couldn't get the strength or the cosmetic requirements that they needed on the sheet metal enclosure here. So the overseas supplier, the customer showed me a sample of the parts they were getting from overseas, and you could flick the box and it would cave in on itself. It would collapse. It was basically like the consistency of tinfoil when they were asking for high strength steel. So we brought in Harvey Vogel Manufacturing, our supplier out of Minnesota. They looked at the product in detail. They were able to offer an in-house powder coat solution, which allowed tight control of the cosmetics. This product had limited cosmetics. It was more of an out-of-the-box cosmetic requirement, because when they're shipping to their customers, it has to look nice as they're installing it. It's a high-value product, so the customer wants to feel like they're getting a high-functioning product when they unbox it. Harvey Vogel was able to handle that, as well as improve the structural integrity of the enclosure over the offshore supply chain. And still deliver a finished cost within the customer's target range. So once the customer started capturing their implicit costs of manufacturing overseas, the quality, the reliability, the communication, all those things, Harvey Vogel was a home run for them. And that's another example of looking at the total value proposition of your supply base.
Thanks, Joel. Great story, great application, and just another good example of a company that made the decision to come back here to the U.S. We shared several examples of part performance. The last one Joel did, it really, and the one that I did prior, really are issues that we have to address often. This last case study is a little bit unique in that the reason it's here, it's a hospitality industry assembly. It stands out, or what stands out, I should say, is the requirement for inventory management and service. So it's not about part quality per se, but once the parts are molded, this is a plastic set of parts that are assembled, it's how they're put together, colors, matching, kitting, things of that sort. The personal care product dispenser went through a next generation redesign. So there's, again, an existing product in the marketplace, needed to be brought up to date, get costs in line. It's sold into multiple hospitality brands in a variety of colors and is modular. So there can be 2, 3, 4 stations depending upon what the customer specifies. We need to be able to work with blanket orders, releases in color, station variation, station meaning modular, that weren't set until just before the product needed to ship. While the overall demand has some consistency to it, you'd have to be clairvoyant to predict what variations to ship when your inventory spends 4 to 6 weeks on a boat, in customs, into the warehouse, and finally off to your customer. Just a giant amount of inventory that you have to tie up to be a responsive supplier. And by getting it here made in the USA, that time is a very small fraction of that. The inventory carrying cost has dropped down. It's not nothing, but it's probably 20% of what it would normally be if material came from overseas. The OEM's customers are much happier with the delivery of the right color products and the right configuration when they need them. Our Supplier Parkway products done a great job with this in that they are very cost competitive on high volume molded components. And then when it comes to doing kitting of various colors, various configurations, they have a number of customers across their 11 plants that do that kind of work every day. So it's been a win-win. And again, because of the customization required, not in the parts, but in the final assemblies, their total cost was absolutely lower than had they done this overseas.
That's a great example. So if you're following along, you probably see that we work with customers in all sorts of industries, and also we work with companies of all sizes. So a lot of you might work with smaller to mid-sized companies, but it's natural for us all to look around the industry and say, what are the biggest, most successful OEMs doing, and what can we emulate that they're doing that's been successful? So one example is Apple. Apple's made a commitment to invest $350 billion in U.S. manufacturing by 2023. This is a company that is built on its overseas supply chain. It's extremely cost and margin conscious historically. And what they're saying is, we already design and engineer here in the U.S. We think we can get the value out of our manufacturing supply chain here in the U.S. to deliver quality products on time out of the gate and be competitive on total value with our overseas suppliers. GE is another company that we all follow in the manufacturing industry. They used to be made in USA through and through across their product lines. Over the years, due to cost pressures, a lot of their appliances have been outsourced overseas. And there's nothing wrong with that, but what GE is saying, they're putting their money where their mouth is and saying, we think we can get a better quality product here in the US, and we're investing over $1 billion to prove that. They're building new facilities, they're creating new jobs. That is a massive stance from a company that is in such a cutthroat competitive industry like home appliances.
It sure is, Joel. And so here we have a few stats that I think are just mind-boggling, surprising to me. They're from sources such as the IMF, the U.S. Census, National Association of Manufacturers, and they tell a story I think many of us don't know. They're certainly surprising to me, whether it's the ratio of dollars spent to the economic impact. For every dollar, you're going to see $2.74 come back into the economy, to GDP, or the $2.4 trillion in manufacturing, which is 11 to 12% of our GDP. And this is the most surprising one. 63% of R&D spent by OEMs goes to outside contract manufacturing. And that's not just traditional electronic CMs. We're talking molders, sheet metal fab, assembly companies, casting companies, prototyping, tool making. This is everywhere that you're involved, and we're involved too. Joel, I think you've got a few last very important items we want everyone to remember.
Yeah, so we fully expect that you've been multitasking throughout this webinar, but do yourself a favor, just take a moment, put your sandwich down, stop answering emails, listen to these 3 critical items that you can take back to your team in terms of how you approach Made in USA in this new environment. Number 1 is refine your sourcing strategy. You got to understand what your sourcing strategy is, and if you even have one. A lot of our customers are still working to define it, so define it and then refine it. And going from product to product, even having different groups in the same building, having different sourcing strategies is not conducive to long-term competitiveness. Understanding all the hidden costs that are in your manufacturing supply chain. So it's not just part price. It can be tempting to compare suppliers in a spreadsheet and think you're making the best decision. Meanwhile, you go with the cheapest supplier and they're shipping you parts that you're having to rework post-machine, in the case of Jim's customer in the food processing industry, just to get them to work in your product line. These are massive costs that you might not be capturing because you've siloed your purchasing, your engineering, and your production teams. It's really important to take a holistic view of those hidden costs and address them in terms of total value, which takes us to our last bullet here. So you'll hear different terms for it. Total cost model we referenced earlier, total cost of ownership. Buy on total value instead of price. What are you actually getting for your money? Are you able to find a U.S. supplier that might be able to ship you a drop-in, plug-and-play subassembly that your Asian suppliers can't do? Creativity on the front end from your suppliers. Jim referenced DFM. We cannot emphasize that enough. It's not just components, but it's designed for assembly, designed for excellence, designed for test. U.S. suppliers, historically, with their communication advantage, can help you take a product from 80% to 100% and get so much cost out on that front end if you're willing to think about it in total value.
That's right, Joel. Well, we appreciate everybody spending part of their lunch with us today. Those three key items are really the takeaways: the sourcing strategy, the hidden costs, and what is that total value that you're going to get when it lands at your facility or your customer's facility. So it's those three, and for those of you that waited, our gift card drawing. We're going to do a quick drawing.
Well, you're really here today.
Our two gift card winners, and then we'll go into our Q&A. And remember, you can send your questions to the staff via the chat window that's in your GoToWebinar screen. So we're going to get our winners here from our ops manager, Pam.
So here they are. We've got two gift cards going out to Carolyn C. from Colorado. Congratulations, Carolyn. And Tom W. from California. We appreciate you guys for spending some time with us. We're going to follow up with you on that, and you can pick your restaurant of choice or your local food bank, whatever you want to do there. And now we're getting to our Q&A portion of the webinar, which is one of my favorite things, hearing real live questions from OEMs like you. So first question here is, we've had a lot of trouble with our Asian suppliers, but management is singularly focused on price point for decision making. How can I convince them to look beyond part price? Well, one thing that I'm going to take a crack at this, Jim, and then feel free to add to it. I do this a lot with customers, especially in normal times when you can visit their facility. But if you're going to your own facility, you can certainly do this right now. Go out on the floor, walk through, look at the parts that you are seeing that you're having trouble with. What's happening on the floor with those parts? Are they having trouble being assembled? Are you getting fallout? Are you having to post-modify those parts received from Asian suppliers, investing additional costs that might not have been captured in that initial quote or your initial costed BOM? So that's one thing I like to look at from both a component and a process standpoint is, what are we having to do to make these costs, to make these components work in our supply chain, and how much is it costing us? It's really trying to quantify some of those implicit costs that you may have missed on the front end.
Well, and again, I'd be happy to chime in because I've been around enough of these that there'll be inventory sitting in the quarantine section of the plant. Sorry to use the word quarantine, but they'll be sit in a conference room with 4, 5, 6 fairly well-paid employees spending hours on end trying to help solve problems. There are just things that they don't get calculated into. The difference between this is costing $1 from you and costing 75 cents from somebody else. It's really their soft costs that can get missed, but if you focus on them when you're making sourcing decisions, sometimes it can be a much better outcome for you, both from a total cost and even early on. We'll say it again. I know I'm a broken record. If you're working through DFM process with somebody, you're going to be able to save a lot of those headaches, save a lot of those quality issues, and save a lot of that cost. And that's easier to do here than with an offshore supplier. So we've got another question here. We did mention material integrity. So the question is, how do I know if my material is different than what was specified? And I'll just say in my experience, whether it's a polymer or a metal. Those are the two I'm most familiar with. There's probably a process for electronic components as well, but many companies will have to, utilize a testing service. They will get a batch of material in. They'll request a certificate of compliance. That certificate says, yes, we made it out of this material, but that's just a piece of paper. And companies where material integrity, product integrity depends on a mechanical component, it depends on it performing per the material that was specified, they will take a batch of those parts, send them out to a lab. They will spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to get those parts analyzed, chemically confirm that that material is what was specified on their print. Joel, I think you had a story about it was an automotive application for Subaru. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. A horrific story. A major car manufacturer who was producing their plastic molded brake pedals overseas, and they had spec'd in a high performance glass filled polymer to meet the strength requirements of slamming on the brakes, for example, and their suppliers switched out the material without their approval. You can't afford to take on that liability that your suppliers created. I mean, that could literally put your company out of business if you have an incident like that. So what Jim is saying is exactly right. You've got to have suppliers that have the traceability in place, that are doing frequent testing of their incoming raw materials to make sure they're getting what they paid for. And if your suppliers overseas don't have those measures in place, if it's a new product, I would recommend going in a different direction. If it's an existing product, you need to be sending parts out every so often to lab test them and confirm that you're getting what you paid for.
Absolutely.
Okay,
important stuff.
Looks like we have one more here from our audience. Thanks for all the great questions. These are right along the lines of what we're talking about. So we have one more here. We're already tooled up in Asia. Do we have to retool, or can we try to bring back the tools? So I can say, Jim, I'll throw it to you after I throw out an initial thought here. So from my experience with I'm thinking mostly in terms of our injection molders. That's a common question I get from customers that are doing injection molding plastic. I've got the tools overseas. What do? Do I have to just pay for new tools? Can I get them back? Can they even run at your facility if I do get them back? What our molders will usually say is that it's worth it to try to transfer them if you can, and see if you can make them function. If you're talking about a large package of parts, automatically just writing off that cost and saying, oh, it's going to cost me $50,000 to $100,000 to retool these parts, it might be worth a little bit of investment and investigation to see if you can get the tools back. See if you have a tool maker like one of our low volume high mix molders, Seaway Plastics. They've got a full tool room on site, so they can bring in a wide variety of injection mold tooling from elsewhere and repurpose it, which will save you a lot of money on the front end. That said, there is the risk that it's going to come in and it's just not going to be configurable to a U.S. supplier's equipment.
Yeah, and they're all really good points, Joel. I will say it's more common now than it has been 5 or 10 years ago. Both our molding suppliers manufacture utilizing or they go procure tooling overseas. They build tooling in-house, but they also will, for the right projects, use it as a way to have additional capacity or a lower cost to buy the tooling overseas and then bring it in. So it's not the bugaboo that everybody wants to avoid like it used to be. But having said that, there are times when it's successful, there are times when it's not, there are times when it is a sunk cost, and I share all of that, not to contradict what you said, but we're in custom industries. Everybody attending here is in custom industries. There's not one easy answer. So it takes a lot of communication. The things that we'll be asking for up front, if that's a consideration to move something, is tooling prints, tooling sizes, a set of sample parts. Whether it's a die casting or an injection molded part, a sample part tells you so much about the tool condition. Sometimes it tells you how the tool operates, how it's gated, etc. That'll give us some good clues. But tool sizes, the size machines they run in, tie bar spacing, things like that, as much detail as we can get our hands on. That's a big part of our job. We take some flack once in a while for asking too many questions. Well, The reason we do that is because we want it to be successful. So, but they're all custom businesses. So the answer for one customer and application may end up being different for the next customer and application. And that's why we say, call us, let's talk about it, let's review it with you. But it's not absolute that it can't be used if it's manufactured overseas. Absolutely can be.
Yeah, it's a great point, Jim. You hit the nail on the head, right? It's custom manufacturing, and what we covered here today might have raised a lot of questions about your specific applications that obviously we can't answer with a one-size-fits-all type answer. So reach out, call us, 303-442-2222. You've got our email on the screen. Pop us a quick note. We will not hesitate to give you a quick consultation on what you're doing, your approach to made in USA versus overseas. We have a network of 17 US-based manufacturers, plastics, metals, and electronics. We will get them under NDA for you. We will enlist all of our engineering support to analyze your products, see what you're doing, and see how we might be able to provide a better solution for you. We really appreciate everybody for being here and spending some time with us. It's a strange time we're living in, but a great time to be exploring topics like these that you might not have the time for otherwise. So thank you again.
Yep. Thank you very much. Couldn't say it better, Joel. So thanks, everybody. Be safe and enjoy the upcoming weekend.
Take care.
Bye.